The guard's breath caught as the police officer snapped cold handcuffs around his wrists and shoved him against the wall. Another officer stepped forward, his badge flashing under the dim lobby light of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Outside, red and blue lights from their car blinked through the glass doors, bathing the marble floor in colors of authority. It was March 18, 1990, early morning after St. Patrick's Day. Boston was sleeping, but inside this quiet museum, something extraordinary had begun. "We got a call about a disturbance," the taller officer said. But when the first guard tried to answer, tape covered his mouth. The second guard froze as the shorter officer whispered, "This is a robbery." Within minutes, both guards were subdued. Tape sealed their eyes, more tape bit into their mouths, and their hands were tied behind their backs. Dragged into the basement, they were cuffed to pipes like prisoners. They could do nothing but listen to the footsteps fade as the fake officers turned into thieves. Above them, the museum, home to paintings by Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Degas, was now wide open. The thieves moved quickly, yet without panic. They carried tools, bags, and a plan. The Dutch room was their first stop. A single blade sliced into canvas, peeling a Rembrandt from its frame with brutal efficiency. The sound was faint, like fabric tearing on a nail, but it echoed like thunder in the silence. They rolled the masterpiece into a tube. The Gardner Museum had always been more than just walls and paintings. Built as Isabella Stewart Gardner's gift to Boston, it was designed as a sanctuary. A courtyard bloomed with flowers and vines. Skylights lit old stone floors. Every frame and sculpture was arranged exactly as Gardner demanded, for all time. That night, her museum's promise of permanence was broken in less than an hour. Room by room, the thieves chose carefully. A Vermeer, one of the rarest in the world, was yanked from its frame. A Manet, small enough to carry like a notebook, was tucked away. Several sketches by Degas, delicate on paper, were taken like grocery lists off a wall. They grabbed a Chinese bronze beaker, heavy and strange, and even stole a golden eagle finial that once perched atop a flagpole. The choices felt chaotic but precise, like men following a script only they knew. Downstairs, the guards strained against tape and metal. One counted silently to fight panic. 100, 200, 300. He pictured the Dutch room upstairs, where heavy frames once held their treasures. Now strangers walked his rounds, strangers held the keys. He blinked against the blindfold and prayed the sun would rise before everything was gone. Upstairs, the thieves paused in front of Vermeer's The Concert. Removing it was delicate, the painting was worth more than all the others combined. The taller thief steadied his hands. In seconds, the canvas came free. A gaping hole was left where beauty once lived. They didn't stop to admire their work. They just moved on. The museum itself seemed alive, watching. Statues stood like pale witnesses in the shadows. Marble eyes followed the intruders but never spoke. The thieves' flashlights swept across portraits and gilded frames, breaking the stillness of centuries. Outside, Boston streets slept on, unaware that history was being stolen in silence. The heist stretched into nearly 90 minutes, an eternity for criminals. Yet the men were calm. They whispered time checks on a walkie-talkie. 28 minutes, one said. Plenty, replied the other. They did not rush. They seemed to know no alarm would sound, no police would come. By the time they finished, the Dutch room was a crime scene of absence. Frames hung empty, their edges frayed with threads of canvas. As one frame lay shattered on the floor, its velvet scraped raw. The room felt violated, like a mouth missing teeth. Morning crept in as the thieves carried their loot to the waiting car. They drove off quietly, the tires rolling soft over wet pavement. No sirens chased them. No neighbor noticed. For Boston, it was just another sleepy Sunday dawn. Hours later, the relief guard arrived for his shift. He rang the bell. No answer. He rang again, harder. Still nothing. His stomach sank. He walked to another entrance, slid his key into the lock, and stepped inside. The lobby was empty, the desk abandoned, lights humming softly. Hello? He called. His voice carried, but the building didn't reply that he found the guards in the basement, tied to pipes like discarded furniture. Their faces were pale, eyes wide behind strips of tape. He ripped it off with trembling hands. They took it, one gasped. They took everything. Together they stumbled upstairs. When the first guard entered the Dutch room, he froze. What he saw wasn't just theft. It was destruction. Empty frames hung like skeletons, swinging gently in the dawn air. A Vermeer was gone. Rembrandt was gone. The room had been gutted. The relief guard pressed his hand against one frame, as if touching it could summon the painting back. His chest ached as he whispered, "Oh my God!" And then, a sound. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving fast through the hallway. The men turned, their faces white with fear. In the doorway stood a figure in a dark jacket. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he stepped forward. One hand lifted to his belt, his shadow stretching across the room. For a breathless second, no one moved. "Boston Police," he said, but something in his tone made them hesitate. The guards stared at the figure in the doorway. His jacket was dark, his boots heavy on the floorboards of the Dutch room. He lifted a badge just high enough to catch the light. "Boston Police," he said firmly. For a second, relief softened the Degas faces. Finally, real officers had arrived. But something in the man's voice carried a weight that didn't feel like safety. He ordered them to stay where they were while he checked the rest of the building. His flashlight beam cut across the torn frames, exposing the scars of the night. Minutes passed in silence until he returned. His face was pale. "You're right," he said quietly. "They took it. Rembrandt. Vermeer. Degas. More than a dozen pieces." He shook his head. "This is bigger than anything I've seen." By morning, detectives flooded the museum. Photographers snapped pictures of empty frames and broken glass. Yellow markers dotted the floor where wood and canvas scraps had fallen. Outside, reporters pressed against the gates, their voices urgent, cameras flashing. Headlines already screamed of the Gardner Heist. Inside, the guards retold their story again and again, how two men dressed as police tricked them, tied them, and walked out with priceless art. Each time they spoke, it felt less real, like they were describing a nightmare instead of their lives. When the crowd of investigators left, silence reclaimed the museum. Staff whispered as they walked through the galleries. The empty frames, still hanging by Isabella Stewart Gardner's instructions, became symbols of absence. Visitors were barred from entry. The museum that once felt alive with history now felt like a mausoleum. The Dutch room in particular seemed wounded, its walls like broken teeth where masterpieces had been torn away. Detectives worked around the clock. They sketched theories on chalkboards, pinned photos of suspects, and listed every stolen piece. Why had the thieves cut the canvases instead of lifting them whole? Why had they ignored certain valuable works while targeting others? And most importantly, how did they know exactly where to strike? The guard, because believing was easier than doubt. Now, doubt gnawed at him. The case spread like wildfire across Boston. In bars, on street corners, in whispered conversations, people speculated. Some swore the paintings were already on a ship bound for Europe. Others claimed they were stashed in basements around the city, rolled up like rugs. A few believed they were bargaining chips for ransom. Each rumor pulled the investigation in a new direction, but none led to answers. Weeks later, the FBI joined the search. Agents in dark suits walked the halls of the museum, their faces grim. They called it one of the largest property crimes in American history. A $10 million reward was announced, then raised again. Still, the Vermeer and Rembrandt remained ghosts. Then came a break. One afternoon, a detective walked into the museum with fresh urgency. "We've got a lead," he told the guards. His voice was sharp, his eyes alive. Someone in Boston's underworld was talking, a man with a history of robberies, someone who liked to brag. He claimed to know where the Gardner art had gone. The guards leaned forward, desperate. "Is it real?" one asked. The detective only tightened his jaw. "We'll find out tonight." That evening, unmarked cars rolled through Boston streets as the sun sank. Their headlights swept over brick walls and shuttered storefronts. Inside the cars, detectives checked weapons and radios. Tension sat thick in the air. They weren't chasing ghosts this time, they were hunting a man who might hold the key. They parked near a narrow apartment building in a quiet neighborhood. Shadows clung to the alleys. The team moved quickly, climbing the stairwell 2 steps at a time. At the door, one officer raised his fist and knocked hard. "Police," he barked. Silence answered. He knocked again. Still nothing. Then, with a shared glance, they forced the door open. Wood splintered, rashing against the wall, flashlights cut through dust as detectives swarmed inside. Papers scattered. Chairs toppled. Voices filled the room, orders shouted, commands barked. At the center stood a man in his 40s, his hands slowly raised. His hair was unkempt, his smile sharp. The room smelled of cigarettes and stale liquor. He didn't look surprised. He looked amused. The lead detective stepped closer, gun steady. "We know you've been talking," he said. "Where are the paintings?" The man chuckled softly, as if the question were a joke. He looked around at the flashlights glaring in his face, then back at the detective. "Looking for the Gardner pieces, aren't you?" His voice was calm, too calm. The detectives froze. Every second stretched thin. The suspect tilted his head, studying their eyes like a cat playing with trapped mice. Then he leaned forward slightly, his smile curling wider. "I can take you to them," he whispered. The room fell silent. For the first time since the heist began, the detectives felt the possibility that the stolen masterpieces might not be gone forever. Yet the man's smile carried another truth: whatever came next would be even more dangerous.